Johnny Mac's in the house. We'll talk football with John. A lot of Eagles news, of course, as the Sports Bash takes a look at Eagles and Colts with a new wide receiver in the fold. By the way, we got it posted right now on our website, 973ESPN.com. Have you seen the picture of this South Jersey corn maze that they had put in they did it in the Philly special? I mean, they literally designed it. Take a look at the picture on our website, 973ESPN.com. It is a corn maze. Of course, we're getting into the fall, and they designed the corn maze as the Philly special play. You got to look at the picture at 973ESPN.com. A lot of people have a lot of time on their hands. It sounded like Jordan Matthews had a lot of time on his hand in Buffalo. That's how he became a father, John.
That was quote of the year from Jordan Matthews. Ain't nothing to do in Buffalo except each other.
Right.
And that's how he and his wife got a Buffalo baby.
I'll tell you what, I don't know what it is about Buffalo, but I remember when I used to do the show with Darwin Walker, and he told us the story about getting off the plane and being like, I am not playing here. And that's basically like he forced himself to Chicago, basically, because he got off the plane and they wanted to give him a physical like at the airplane hangar.
Poor Buffalo. And I know, hey, Derek Boyko, the long-time public relations guy with the Eagles, is now the PR chief in Buffalo. And people say, how could you leave Philadelphia for Buffalo? And he was a Buffalo native. So, there's certain people who love it and swear by it.
Sure.
But, yeah, for athletes, it's usually not first on the list.
No, but let's talk about Jordan. He's now in the fray. They signed him after much speculation that he was in the building yesterday. He signed, sealed, and on the practice field today wearing number 80. But do you anticipate that he will be right out on the field on Sunday?
I do. They only have 3 healthy receivers before Jordan. And this is a team, and we talk about it a lot, the default personnel for Doug Peterson and his offense is 11 personnel. That's 3 wide receivers on the field. That's really difficult to play if you only have 3 bodies available. So it's important to get him up to speed. One of the reasons he's here is because he already knows the offense. He already knows the quarterback. He's extremely close with Carson Wentz. They've worked together well before. So, yeah, I mean, the Eagles haven't flat out said he's going to play, but he's going to play. I don't think there's any question about it.
All right, you wrote at 973ESPN.com. Now that he's here, how does he fit in? So give us a little breakdown from you in terms of how he fits in initially, and then where do you see it going once Alshon Jeffries is back?
Well, I mean, in the best-case scenario, the 3 receivers are going to be Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar and Jordan Matthews. And in that instance, Jordan has got to be the guy in the slot. So that kicks Nelson Aguilar outside the numbers, and that's the issue. Can he do it? He's a different guy now than he was his first 2 years in the league when he lacked confidence. So I do think it will be better than it was during his first 2 seasons. But I'm also not going to lie to you and say I expect it to be great, because I don't think he's an outside receiver in this league. If you look at Deshaun Jackson, who Eagles fans know very well from his time here and his time killing the Eagles, what do deep threats in this league do? They track the football in the air. They go get it, and that's not the strength of Nelson Aguilar. The strength of Nelson Aguilar is his route running, his short area quickness, and his ability to do things after he catches the ball. I think we all know if you were to sort of list the skill set of receivers, tracking the football is going to be low on Nelson Aguilar's skill set. So I don't think necessarily it's a great fit, but you can't really do that much in this particular time of year. I mean, I know people look at Josh Gordon, and a lot of people wanted the Eagles to sign him, but the reality is he's got tremendous off-the-field issues. it's difficult to get a perfect fit this time of year. I think this is the best the Eagles could do. They made the right decision, but it's not, it's not a home run by any stretch of the imagination. There's a reason he was unemployed, and we're in week 3.
Yeah, I kind of agree that, number one, he was here out of necessity, and the fact that he could get the offense quickest out of all the potential options out there. I mean, here's a guy that 16 touchdowns his first 2 years. My question really is, I don't know how much you got a chance to see or talk to him today, is he healthy? I mean, he got cut by the Patriots because, he wasn't healthy, and they didn't think he was going to be healthy, and we know they're a team that's been looking for wide receiving help. Heck, they went out and took a chance on Corey Coleman and then Josh Gordon and thought that this guy couldn't make it.
Yeah, he says he's healthy. Doug Peterson says he's healthy. That's the reason the Eagles sort of were looking at him yesterday to make sure he was healthy. But he's had a lot of issues since he left here. He had issues, remember, the offseason before he left here. He missed a lot of it, and that's when Nelson Aguilar was shifted to the slot, and the light bulb kind of went off. You remember us talking all that offseason work about how good Nelson looked inside, and the Eagles saw that as well and said, you know what, we got an opportunity to get a young cornerback on a cost-effective contract for essentially 2 years in Ronald Darby. If we kick in a third-round pick and send it to Buffalo with Jordan Matthews, the second part of that reason is that why they felt comfortable doing that is because Nelson looked so good in the slot and Jordan was not healthy and gave him that opportunity.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time since Jordan Matthews hasn't had some kind of leg or groin or hamstring issue. And all we can do is wait and see. He claims he's healthy. The Eagles claim he's healthy.
John, you look at Alshon, Nelson, and Torrey Smith. That was last year. You start the year with Alshon, Nelson, and Mike Wallace, and now it's going to be Alshon, Nelson, and Jordan Matthews. Which trio do you like best?
It's interesting. I thought this one projected, certainly on paper, to be the best, simply because they seem to complement each other. And by that, I mean Alshon, Mike Wallace on the outside, and Nelson Aguilar in the slot. We're never going to get to see it, so we're never going to know. But certainly the skill set of an outside receiver who could run, and Mike Wallace can run, is what you want. And that's what they tried to have with Torrey Smith. It didn't necessarily work out that well. They tried it again with Mike Wallace. Didn't work out again. Now you have a different sort of scenario, and you're forced. You have two slot receivers who feel most comfortable in there. You're forced to kick one outside, and because Nelson's got a lot more speed than Jordan Matthews, it's got to be Nelson Aguilar.
John McMullen is with us at JF McMullen on Twitter. The one thing with Jordan Matthews, too, is obviously him and Carson know each other well. He knows the offense pretty well, that he should be able to step back in here. But are they done? Do you think, because there are some reports that they're going to work out Jeremy Maclin, but he's not healthy enough to even work out, which is kind of crazy in itself. But do you think that they could continue to add to this wide receiving core?
Yeah, I do. I mean,
and what more do you know about the Maclin stuff?
Well, this is not the old Jordan Matthews who was, catching 75 receptions a season for the Eagles and was a huge part of the offense. This is a Jordan Matthews who comes in on basically a week-to-week basis. I mean, if he goes out there against Indianapolis and looks terrible, and can't get any separation and truly has lost it from a physical standpoint, they're going to have receivers in here working out, and they're going to try to do the best they can and cobble this together. And if Jeremy Maclin gets healthy at some point, and that's the situation, and they still feel they need help, they'll bring him in and give him a look. And there's other receivers as well. This, as I said, from this point, it's a week-to-week situation. I think the hope is the Eagles are getting back the Jordan Matthews that left here and at least a guy who can be sort of a volume guy. I always described him while he was here, and can catch those passes and get some separation in the middle of the field, in the slot. I think that's the hope, but again, you're not married to him any longer. You can move on very, very easily.
Were you able to get any more info on Maclin, whether or not that he is going to work out next week?
No, we never got to ask Doug that because there was so much with Carson Wentz and Jordan Matthews, and, you get cut off after about 12, 13 minutes. So we never got confirmation that he's going to work out. John Clark reported it, got from an Eagles source that it's not 100%, it's not definite. I think it depends on whether or not, Jeremy Maclin feels good enough to where he can show up and have a workout that he's going to be proud of, and secondly, whether the Eagles feel they need more receiving help. And by the way, they do. They could use more than one receiver. So there's a school of thought that, hey, if Jeremy Maclin's ready to go, if he's willing to come in here at a veteran minimum, he's healthy, is he an upgrade over Kamar Aiken? Well, probably. So who's to say they can't have both of them?
Yep, I agree with that. And I'm interested, to see how much Maclin might have left in the tank. I mean, here's a guy that, he had that monster year. Everybody thought it would be a shoo-in that he was back, and he ended up going to Kansas City, which was kind of a surprise that he left, but it did not do much there. But he was with Doug. So Doug at least knows him pretty well. So there is a connection.
Well, he had one big season in Kansas City before sort of the injuries started to take toll. So he did have one big season out there. That was a Chip Kelly thing. He remember where he went to school. He went to Missouri. So I don't think that was sort of blindsided to the rest of the league. I think the Eagles felt that he would ultimately come back, but because of Andy Reid, because Andy Reid has always liked Jeremy Maclin and obviously had a history with him, he felt very comfortable going there. But either way, it's not that guy.
Yeah.
It's not the guy who was the last season in Philadelphia's first season in Kansas City, who was a really, really good receiver. If you're getting Jeremy Maclin back at this stage, you're hopeful that he could be a third or fourth receiver that can just help you get through this.
Mm-hmm. Jason Avant was on last hour. I asked him about Dez Bryant. He said Dez can still play with the right quarterback. He can still be productive in this league with the right quarterback. Would you agree with that? And is Carson Wentz the right quarterback?
Well, Carson Wentz is the right quarterback if he's healthy for every receiver, number one. That's a top 5 quarterback in this league. So we've talked about it a lot. One of the reasons Alshon Jeffrey decided to come here and turn down more money from Minnesota was because Carson Wentz was here. Receivers understand they have a chance to do some big things when Carson is healthy and on the field. Now, I understand what Jason is saying. Dak Prescott is not an accurate quarterback. He's sort of like the new age quarterback that has to throw to open receivers. The really, really, truly great quarterbacks in this league throw their receivers open. In other words, they get in a rhythm. You'll see the ball come out before the receivers in his break, the chemistry between them and great receivers. So I understand what he's saying, but Mike, I've said this time and time and time again on this show. People see the name Dez Bryant and think it's the Dez Bryant who was an all-pro. He has not been the same since the Jones fracture in his foot. He is not nearly the same guy physically. He doesn't have the same explosion. That's the issue. He was never a great route runner. He did it with his athleticism, and he was just bigger and stronger and faster than everybody else. He's no longer that. So I disagree with Jason.
The one thing I will say is this. I initially would say I think you're right. He got nothing left in the tank. His numbers over the last 3. Now, last year he played 16 games. The one thing I will say is he had 69 catches. 6 of them were for touchdowns. Could he be a red zone target, and is that something that this team needs, or is it they need more of a guy that is a big play guy, which he used to be?
Well, yeah, I'm not – there's two different things. I'm not saying Dez is not an NFL receiver. He can still play at this level. He's no longer Dez Bryant. He's no longer all-pro level. He's no longer top 5 receiver in this league level. He's at best a wide receiver 2. He's probably a third receiver. And there's a couple of problems with that, with former star players. A, you have to accept that reality, and that's very difficult. I think it was very difficult for Dez in Dallas, and he certainly wasn't willing to take less money and do things of that nature. And remember, the Eagles are bringing in guys on 1-year veteran deals. Dez has turned down offers from Cleveland and Baltimore because he wants a lot of money. And I guarantee the Eagles aren't willing to give it to him. At some point, I think Cleveland probably goes back to it. Maybe somebody else goes back to it. But he would have to be willing to take a 1-year veteran deal here. I don't think he'd be willing to do that.
Does he want to play still? I know there was a report. I'm looking at Josina Anderson reports the Browns are still not certain Dez Bryant wants to play football. Is that I don't want to play football for the Browns, or is I don't want to play football?
I think it's a combination. I think he'd prefer not to play for the Browns for a number of reasons, the reputation of that organization, although they've been very, very competitive. They can't win. They find new ways to lose. But I think from a talent standpoint, they're finally turning the corner. They have some good players there. I don't think there's sort of a lag before people will start to realize that. Certainly free agents before they start to realize that. So that's number one. Number two, I mean, I talked about it a lot with Adrian Peterson. Once you're at that level where you're amongst the top paid players at your position and you sort of take a hit and you're no longer that, you have to come to grips with it. And I think, as I said, Dez wants a lot of money, and I don't think he's going to get a lot of money. So do I think he wants to play? Yes. Am I sure he wants to play for a middling or lower salary? That is a more difficult question to answer.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com at JF McMullen here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. John, you asked Doug Peterson today about Frank Reich and how cognizant they are about not only how well he knows the personnel, but how well he's going to know the weaknesses of this team and who they're going to go after and all that kind of stuff. How revealing was Doug Peterson on that today?
Yeah, I mean, he admitted there's something to it, but I think everybody, and not just Doug, but also Jim Schwartz and Frank Reich himself, we talked to him on a conference call today, all kind of downplayed it. But there is some reality that, hey, Frank knows where all the bones are buried on this offense. There's no question about that. So there has to be some changes, some shifts than the typical game. But it also works both ways. I mean, nobody knows as much about what Frank Reich thinks as Doug Peterson. So it's kind of a wash. And I think that's what everybody is trying to point out, that, he knows us, but we know them. So in that ways, the Eagles rarely play the Colts, but as Doug said, it's almost like playing a longtime rival. Because they're going to know the Eagles and the Eagles are going to know them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that Reich has a little bit of an advantage because he knows the Eagles' defensive personnel very well, and he can say, hey, I know this guy pretty well. We could do this and go after him.
Well, and that's what Frank said. He said, generally it's about philosophy, it's about scheme, and it's about briefing his coaches on certain players and their trends. But he kind of pointed out, look, you're the offensive coordinator. You don't spend a ton of time looking at the Eagles' defense. So it's not like he was picking apart film about the Eagles' defense. He would often talk to Jim Schwartz about scout teams and more about, Jim would say, hey, is this look legitimate? Is this look something we might see? But it's not breaking down film of the Eagles defense. That wasn't his job. So, but the reality is he's a good coach. He was here for 2 years, and he understands the players, and he understands, as I said, their strengths and weaknesses. So when it comes to philosophy and it comes to scheme and it comes to the strengths and weaknesses of players, he definitely knows that.
John, I'm looking at the Eagles injury report. Fresh email from them. Jay Ajayi did not participate. Nate Geary and DJ Alexander, special teams guy. But I guess it's looking more and more likely like Jay will not be back there. And I do not see Darren's name, Sproles, on this at all. So it looks like Sproles will go and Jay Ajayi unlikely.
Well, no, it's interesting. Darren should be on there. He didn't practice with the hamstring. Interestingly,
oh, sorry, Darren is in there. It was the screen wasn't big enough. My bad.
Yeah, I didn't know if they put him on there, but he definitely didn't practice. And Doug in his press conference before practice said Jay was closer than Darren, which I was a little surprised at because after the game in Tampa, Jay was not speaking well of his back. But there's a reason Josh Adams was elevated from the practice squad, and I think there's at least an opportunity. I don't think Darren's going to play. Doug kind of intimated that today. Jay's more of a 50-50 type thing, but there's a good chance that neither of them will play, and you'll see a lot of Corey Clement and Wendell Smallwood.
John McMullen is with us here. Alshon Jeffrey, what's that story is getting a little bizarre. Is there any more clarity on when Alshon could be returning, or what is he actually doing?
Well, Doug said he was going to return to some team drills this week, and he compared it to Carson Wentz a couple weeks ago. So if that holds up, he would be back next week against Tennessee. I can't imagine he would miss week 5, which would be Minnesota, I believe. That is the time frame for him. I don't think he's going to play this week. I think it's probably likely he's going to play next week. I can't imagine they would get to week 6 simply because then they could have put him on the PUP list to start, and they would have had sort of the extra roster spot. Now, there's 2 ways to look at it. He couldn't have practiced, and he is practicing. So you take that into effect. But, hey, I mean, he had his surgery in February after the Super Bowl, late February. And it's generally, from every doctor I've talked to, it's generally a 6-month rehab. And 6 months would have been late August, and now we're in late September. So he has taken a bit longer than expected. And I think that's obviously been a disappointment for the Eagles because, hey, he's by far the best receiver on this team, and that's the biggest struggle they're having is that receiver.
All right, we'll finally get more. We'll finally get a look at Carson Wentz, who, by the way, spoke today. The one part of it that I saw that stood out to me was he was asked if he could have played the first couple of weeks. He kind of seemed like he indicated that he thought he could, but there was a plan in place, right? Was that what you got?
Yeah, he could have played, and he wanted to play. And they were just, and I've said it time and time again, they were waiting for 9 months, and 9 months was September 13th. And then the second part was he needed a full week of practice after he was cleared or after that 9-month period. And that's what happened this week. So September 13th was Thursday. That was after practice started for Tampa Bay. That's why he didn't play last week. And that's why he's playing this week. They were just waiting for that 9-month mark because statistics say there's less possibility of getting a re-tear after that 9-month mark. So I think that was very, very important to him, even though everybody, and that's not just Carson, that's Doug Peterson as well, everybody on the football side thought he could have played, but they were just being cautious about it.
All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. John McMullen, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thanks, pal.
Hey, thanks, Mike.